Well, Mark opens today with Jesus gathering the apostles who have been out on a mission. Jesus and the apostles are exhausted. So in keeping with good self-care, they are intending to take some time out, to recharge, to be still in that deserted place so they may be filled with God. Then, before you know it, people in need besiege them. Jesus, in response, turns to those in need to bear and bring the healing and the wholeness they seek. I'm not sure this is a passage that will be utilised in the Boundaries in Ministry training course. Not sure it's one we'd refer to as an example of good boundary self-care. What we hear is that people are in desperate need of healing. They press and they push and they rush and they hurry. They race ahead to get to the place that Jesus and the apostles are going to before they've even arrived. Desperation to be healed, to have the one fix all their problems and the problems of their loved ones. And that is exactly what Jesus and his apostles are doing. People ask, they receive, even though the need seems overwhelming and Jesus and the apostles are exhausted. As it happens, the lectionary readings for today omit two intervening stories: the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on water, which is why it seems strange they've gone one to one place and then quickly popping back across the lake again. Those two stories are in between. And it bothers me. I know it's to do with the lectionary readings that are coming up, but even so. In the feeding of the 5,000, the resources needed to fulfill the need, the hunger of those gathered, upon whom Jesus has compassion, they were found within the gathered group of people. From their resourcefulness, abundance more than sufficient to meet need was enabled. In the Jesus walking on water story, the disciples are making their way back across the lake. They are rowing hard into hard weather, slow but steady. Their shock and fear arise when they see Jesus walking on water. Not because they needed the storm stilled. Sure, once Jesus decides to hitch a ride, the storm eases, but it's not what they're asking for. Both these passages suggest to me the capacity to fulfill the need in their midst lies within the people that come. It may need to be pointed out, but it lies there. To omit these two stories means we hear the gospel today as one of desperation and of dependency. It's that which bothers me. But, I've got that off my chest now. So let's have a look and see what Mark wants us to learn of Jesus. For how we understand Jesus, who we've come to discern as God present, that informs our understanding of God within the world and God within us. And how we understand God influences what we do, how we live, our attitude and our impetus toward the world. So what do we hear of Jesus when he's faced with that desperate crowd who are seeking healing? He responds with compassion. Compassion literally means with suffering. In our day and age, Douglas John Hall suggests, most of us don't hear compassion when we hear that word in its literal sense. We think of it more as a synonym for pity. Pity is something you can manage from afar, not compassion. You do not have compassion unless you suffer with those to whom you refer. And that is exactly in the gospel today what Jesus embodies, literally compassion. He identifies with those who've come to him without condescension and without pity. For some reason, it made me think of a piece of one of those news bites that you hear, recent rhetoric from our political landscape. Certain minister, when talking about shoebox apartments, suggesting that they were a step up from tents and cars, so those who got them should be jolly well grateful. I wonder if that minister considered actually living in one himself. That literal compassion thing, which then got me thinking, it could be a really sound way to save money, that shoebox apartments were considered suitable provision of accommodation for said ministers. I wonder if that might change or influence decision-making. Just a thought. But how is compassion most commonly expressed today? As Christianity evolved in the West, perhaps especially the missional spread version of Christianity, it's not surprising that it came to express through the culture in which it was embedded, a culture that was replete with colonizing intentions and capitalist underpinnings. We can therefore understand how such influence might lead to compassion becoming distanced from its literal meaning roots. For compassion to be expressed and provided through charitable means, through charitable agencies, commodified for efficiency, you might say. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. I am acknowledging that as an effective means for those who had more to trust the giving from their abundance to those in need into the hands of agents who knew about these things. Over time, the charitable industry has flourished, and if you don't look too closely, a good and a generous thing is done by it. Out of good intention, aware of our blessings, we want to share. We want to fulfill our responsibility and our obligation to care for those who are not as well blessed as we are. However, it is a way of caring that keeps us at arm's distance from those we give to, paradoxically turning charity into an entirely self-indulgent affair in which the only thing that matters to the giver is the knowledge that they have given, rather than any knowledge of the recipient or the witnessing of the effects of their action. I wonder how deeply we have considered the potential impact of our compassion as charity giving. Now, I was tweaked, as I've already said, by the selected gospel passages with their hint of dependency. So I was intrigued to read this reflection by Robert Lupton. He says, "The compassion industry is almost universally accepted as a virtuous and a constructive enterprise. Yet those closest to the ground quietly admit that they may be hurting more than helping. How? Dependency, destroying personal initiative. When we do for those in need what they have the capacity to do for themselves, we disempower them. Jesus' compassion today is intimate and immediate. A travel-weary, grubby, besieged Jesus sees the desperate, needy, and disordered people who flocked to him, and he chooses to open himself, to risk compassion, to risk experiencing the pain and the suffering and the desperate need of those who jostle and shove and push. His neighbours. No arm's length safety, theoretically doing good to someone over there. This is about the people we bang up against, we know or can know and could love if we were willing to risk it. Confronting? Uncomfortable? Goodness me, surely this wouldn't be expected of us. After all, such blatant show of desperation is a bit much, a bit unrestrained and unsettling for those of us who prefer good order, thank you very much. To experience someone whose needs are so raw and on display, worn on the outside, is all rather repellent. However, that reaction in us of distaste and discomfort, it could give us pause to reflect. The discomfort of that desperate, worn on the outside need for healing. It may be this way for us because it's not too far from our own experience. Our carefully covered over, hidden inside need for healing and wholeness. The distaste and discomfort we experience in part because of our own inner, sharp and broken pieces. I don't think that we should stop giving to charity, but I do think we might be bothered knowing who and how, and developing relationship with those people we might be giving to. I don't think we're asked to assume the burden of the need of our neighbour, as if somehow we're responsible to fix it. I do wonder if we're asked to be willing to stay, willing to stand with, willing to hear, willing to respect, willing to learn, and when we have developed mutual relationship, contribute to bring about change as it is needed, as is appropriate, to be literally compassionate, suffer with. And then within the trust of relationship, when we are honest about our needs, the resourcefulness is able to respond is there. The resources generated and the solutions will arise from within the resourcefulness of our relationship and our meeting of our mutual deep need. And maybe then the 5,000 will be fed, but that's for later.